Good morning, good morning, good morning, beautiful people. As always, this is the day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. As always, God is good, and He is good all the time. All right, so the video that we're going to motherfucking react to today, this one is very, very needed because I am tired. I am tired of going back and forth with people about what cultural appropriation is, right? So I am pretty active in the sports community on YouTube, in the sense that I watch all the sports, right? And so these people in the basketball community, street ball, they try to say street ball, but it's more organized. It's not street ball because they try to do everything in their power to steer away from how street ball is really structured. However, these motherfreakers, you always got this white boy that comes out trying to dress all what they interpret as hood, street, black, right? When I look at it, I just look at your motherfucking try hard on trying to look like a black person, right? And I already have my, there's some things about even black men that is like, bro, you stole that from black women. However, this is in regards to people outside of black in general, outside of blackness, motherfreaking appropriating cultures. There's this nigga named Logo Lock from 773. He claims that he's from the streets, the trenches of motherfreaking Chicago. Now, this nigga is always on the soft niggas motherfreaking lives talking junk, right? But when you see straight up street type people, you know what I'm saying? Whether it's from Chicago, Maryland, any place in Maryland, like Baltimore, New York City, this nigga's mum's the word, but he can sit here and argue back and forth with me as a female, And this nigga, he is white and Mexican. Straight up told me he's white and Mexican, but think that it's okay for him to say nigga because he grew up in Chicago and he feels that he's from the streets. You appropriate in culture, you appropriate in language, you appropriate in looks, you appropriate in our culture off the strength that you think that you rate this because you grew up poor and your parents couldn't afford to live anywhere else but the motherfreaking ghetto, aka surrounded areas of where black people are. People overlook the fact that terms like ghetto, motherfreaking terms like urban, all it is to signify black, ethnic. You got to think the creation of the colonial America, yeah, Native Americans were here. Yeah, there was things that was done poorly to them. However, for some reason, it motherfreaking got summed up as white versus black. And if you didn't fit in with either white or black, you was just this random little category over here, right? And that's where everybody else, you got the Asians, the Latinos, the motherfreaking natives, y'all the randoms, even though societally, we're about the same. Stuff narrowed down, black and white. That's all you had to fit in. And so now you got niggas who grew up, and I don't take nothing from it. Blackness has been popular culture forever. At least 100 years. Definitely more, but at least 100 years. Because when you think about the 1920s, when jazz and black music became more cool and it was in these hip spaces. The same thing when you trickle down later into you got people like motherfreaking Luther Vandross. You know what I'm saying? When you think of music, when you think of entertainment, your brain takes you to black folks, because at the end of the day, all you really see is white people and black people. Yeah, white people ain't cool. They ain't nothing cool about their culture. But blackness, I mean, come on. Everybody want to be black. There's this thing that, black people can say whatever they want to say, and they don't get to seem racist, and, it don't hurt nobody. That's just one of those unspoken things about being black. It is what it is. But you got these people out here who want to sit here, and they're usually 9 times out of 10, I am going back and forth and arguing with a nigga who is not black about cultural appropriation. I got called a motherfreaking What the freak that nigga called me? This Asian kid called me a motherfucking culture gatekeeper. This nigga legit called me a culture gatekeeper because of the fact that I told him, along others, that there's this guy named crswht who literally exploits the black character. He puts on this black persona because when he first came out, he looked like your regular just white boy who ain't had no money, but kind of street dress, but kind of skater. He give you like Eminem, Justin Timberlake merged vibes, right? Nigga wasn't getting no views like that. He even called himself a rapper. Nobody paid attention to him because why? He looked like your average white boy. But you put in some cornrows. He got the vernaculars and the colloquialisms of black folk, and he puts on what he think black folks act like. Now this nigga is motherfucking getting notoriety. He went from like tens of thousands of followers to hundreds of thousands of followers after this change. And it's so motherfucking obvious that this nigga even be telling the white boys on his squad, like, yo, you need to get some swag. Swag? Who got swag? Who created swag? Niggas with my skin folk. Tell him to get some swag. He bothers them about their hair. He got another nigga on his motherfucking live. And this dude ended up putting braids in his hair. White boy. When he first came out, all he wore was a bandana looking like some wannabe biker dude. He had the slick back comb over look. To now this nigga over here got the motherfucking the fade with the braids on the top. Cause they know you don't look cool looking like your average Tommy. You don't look cool looking like your average Christopher. Your average Kenny, but you throw some motherfucking black swag on it, your viewership go up, people think you're tough. It's weird. So I'm tired of arguing with you non-black people about what culture appropriation is because I'm striking nerves. And I'm telling you that you're culture appropriate. You're not motherfucking appealing to the culture in the sense of like, oh, I'm just admiring this culture. That's not what you're doing. You're making a mockery, especially with Christopher. His interpretation of what a black person, he'll tell you in a heartbeat, I grew up in this environment. I'm a product of my environment. So you think how you act is what you seen growing up. Okay, so, and when you watch this nigga, he's loud, he's dirty. Like all he does is dig in his nose, dig in his mouth, and he eats and smells this stuff, dig in his ears. He's dirty, he's loud. And he's a bully. He literally bullies. He bullies the niggas in the community that you would consider soft. Even if they're black, you consider them the gentrified soft types. He bullied those. He slaps white boys. He don't buck up with no real black dudes. And when I say real black dudes, is that the black dudes that he interprets as about that life. He comes for the ones that he think are more whitewashed, they're the anime liking type, the nerds. This is what he does. And so this is what you interpret black folks as. And then to have some black people defend him is even crazy. I'm going off on a tangent, y'all. Let me start this video. Give me a second. Let go.
The winner is Marlon Brando in The Godfather.
On March 27, 1973, Apache and Yaqui actress and activist Sacheen Littlefeather ascended the stage at the Academy Awards. Amidst a mixture of cheers and boos from the evening's attendees, Littlefeather read a portion of a prepared statement on behalf of that year's Best Actor winner, Marlon Brando. She declined the award on Brando's behalf, stating his reason for turning his back on Hollywood's highest honor, the movie industry's continued misrepresentation of Native American people in film. Littlefeather was there in his stead to draw attention to the American Indian movement and to shine light on the issue of cultural appropriation in film. Cultural appropriation. Although the phrase and the practices it describes are familiar to most of us, it can feel ambiguous. And that's primarily because while inappropriate or offensive uses of other cultures are often quite obvious, the subtleties of the conversation are usually drowned out by protests that appreciation cannot be appropriation. The actual phrase cultural appropriation first appeared in print in 1945 and is attributed to the late Professor Arthur E. Christie, and it's been a topic of very heated debate ever since. As a term, cultural appropriation has its roots in the latter half of the 20th century, with its highest usage coming after 1980, although the concept of stealing or misusing a culture was on our collective radar from the 19th century onwards. And marginalized groups have been speaking up against cultural appropriation that either diminishes or sidelines the contributions of the people who created certain practices. But at the heart of these conversations are three daunting and often amorphous concepts. First, what even is culture? How does power operate in relationship to culture, and what are the boundaries between participating versus appropriating another culture? So before we get into the debate of whether or not culture can be appropriated and misused, we should start with the basics, namely, what is culture? Well, as a cultural historian myself, I'm going to tip my hat to 20th century theorist Raymond Williams' 1976 definition
Excuse me, y'all, I'm over here burping from this motherfucking kombucha.
of culture. According to Williams, our modern use of culture exists largely under three main umbrellas. First, there are the intellectual and spiritual and aesthetic development realms of culture that encompass shared ideologies and beliefs. This is probably the least tangible portion of culture. Two good examples are the concept of a shared faith or patriotism. Both have a fixed set of values and ideas attached to them and can inspire cultural production, but they are also ideologies that exist even if they aren't being actively enacted. So you can feel patriotism even when you're not actively performing a ritual that displays it. Just like you can experience shared faith even when you're not engaging in religious ceremonies. Then there's a portion of culture that covers the shared way of life of a defined group of people, meaning the way that a fixed group interacts and lives in accordance with their common ideologies. This can be very specific, like the shared lifestyle of one finite group of people, or extremely expansive, like a shared reality that extends between all of humanity. So as far as we know, all humans share the earth. All humans, in order to survive, must eat. But the way we live on Earth, whether in a large city or in a rural community, is defined by the people we are directly engaging with on a daily basis. And the third and final category of culture that Williams describes, and the one we'll talk about the most.
This is the part that people steals the most. Is what we motherfucker produce out of our culture, which is the way we talk, the way we look, our arts, that's music, you know what I'm saying? Drawings, everything. Swag.
Today is related to shared creative and artistic productivity. This includes the art, literature, music, films, songs, and general representation of a given culture or group of people. Cultural production is the most concrete portion of culture because it gives us objects, and often physical items to look at and engage with. So although this all may seem a bit dense, it's helpful to think about culture like a series of concentric circles radiating outward from the center, and you're the center. In the first circle are the things closest to us, like ideologies, because they exist largely in our minds. Then we have shared ways of life, or things that we engage in with people directly around us. And in the farthest circle is cultural production, or the objects, artworks, and creations that express our culture and that we shuttle out into the world. And being farthest away from the center, that's also the sphere most prone to traveling far away from its original context, and therefore being taken up elsewhere. And now that we've briefly waded through the waters of what exactly culture is, you've probably found the underlying connective tissue of these three spheres, namely that culture is shared and big and constantly occurring. Plus, it's a bit like language because it needs a collective of people to make a shared meaning. So often when people argue against the existence of cultural appropriation, the basis of the argument is centered on culture's shared nature, since something that is shared isn't owned by one particular person. But there's a weakness in this argument of ownership that stems from the way we think about possession. Some forms of ownership are rather straightforward and therefore easier to understand. If you go out and purchase a car, you have sole ownership of the car and are entitled to all of its benefits, like faster and more convenient transportation, in addition to all of its drawbacks, like pesky car repairs. But ownership of culture doesn't operate that way because it belongs to a group that the culture stems from and not one discrete person or persons. And as Professor Susan Scafidi notes in her book, Who Owns Culture, there are legal challenges when thinking of discrete ownership in relationship to cultural products. Legal protections like copyright or trademarking rely on a stable cultural product with a set number of creators, like a song with a fixed list of songwriters. But culture is constantly evolving and changing, so Scafidi warns that patenting an idea that is shared among a group may provoke ossification of a culture and its artifacts. But despite the difficulty of codifying cultural ownership in legal terms, there are ways that culture can be appropriated or misused once it's divorced from its original context. People who are against believing that cultural appropriation even exists often say that America is a melting pot of various cultures, and therefore no one should be allowed to lay ownership to any particular form of expression. As Scafidi also notes, indeed, the tension-filled history of American immigration and even internal migration indicates that the cultural products of others are often easier to accept and assimilate than the individuals or huddled masses themselves. And that's because people's admiration for the cultural products they consume, like art, music, literature, and fashion, can exist quite separately from the real-world treatment of the people whose culture they're appropriating from. Because at the heart of cultural appropriation isn't just a cultural object, but power. Appropriation happens when you have a position of power or a member of a dominant culture who's able to take the parts of a marginalized culture that you enjoy, divorce them from their original meaning, and use them for entertainment value without considering their original context or having to deal with the negative ramifications that someone from that culture would have to deal with as a result of that same action.
And this is why Chris White is a cultural appropriator.
So while it may
He's a white guy who is a part of the dominant group who literally took parts of black culture and used to exploit them and took them from their original meaning. Because when we look and talk like this and act like that, it's because this is us. This is us. There's no way around it. We've been born into this. We've been we literally have been shaped to talk and act and dress and think the way that we do. I mean, at the end of the day, Christopher is a white dude. Chris White is white. A white man with a criminal record is more likely to get hired than a black man with no criminal record. So his upbringing has absolutely nothing to do with jack squat. Chris White is a felon. Yet he will get hired over his motherfreaking Doge Debo. Even if Debo has no criminal record, Chris White would get hired over him. Why? Because of his white skin. The nigga's white. So at the end of the day, you as a white man, there's just things that you can and cannot do. Point blank, period.
seem benign to the person who's extracting and enjoying the culture, the resulting damage can have
motherfucking white people, Asians wearing cornrows, like, come on. And I hate when I bring up braids, about how braids is a black people thing, and they be like, no, it's not, because natives wear braids. Y'all niggas wear braids in the sense of, it's like plaits. It's just braided out of your head like this. You niggas don't wear cornrows. You ain't got all these intricate designs and stuff. Like, our braids historically is attached to the fact that our like ancestors would legitimately create maps into our hair. That's where you get all these different patterns of the braids from. But then you niggas come and like, oh, I like this. It's cool. Y'all look cool. I want to wear it because I could do it. I grew up poor. I'm Latino. I'm not white. But what box do you check? Because not every Latino identify as black.
Real-world implications for the people whose culture has been misrepresented or misused. So let's return to the 1973 Academy Awards. Although in large part Sacheen Littlefeather's disruption of the ceremony and Marlon Brando's absence were meant to draw attention to the specific issue of Native American representation in film, the longer statement that the actor released after the broadcast pointed to larger cultural issues. Brando wrote in the full statement that was published in newspapers after the ceremony that his decision wasn't only about the movies being made and the way that Native American cultures had been appropriated and distorted, but also the real-world issues that arose from this systematic mischaracterization. Of Littlefeather's appearance at the award show, he wrote, "Perhaps at this moment you're saying to yourself, what the hell has all this got to do with the Academy Awards? Why is this woman standing up here ruining our evening, invading our lives with things that don't concern us and that we don't care about?" I think the answer to those unspoken questions is that the motion picture community has been as responsible as any for degrading the Indian and making a mockery of his character, describing him as savage, hostile, and evil. It's hard enough for children to grow up in this world. When Indian children watch television and they watch films, and when they see their race depicted as they are in films, their minds become injured in ways we can never know. Brando also noted that at the time the 1970s,
which is applicable for other races as well, like black folk.
73 Oscars were occurring, the town of Wounded Knee, South Dakota had been occupied by American Indian Movement members who were met with military forces. The town also has historical significance because it's the site of the Wounded Knee Massacre of 1890, where an estimated 150 to 300 Lakota Sioux were killed by US troops. So the decision to represent Native American cultures in movies as inherently violent and untamable also served as a way of appropriating culture and misaligning history. To Littlefeather and Brando's point, the pleasure American audiences got from watching old westerns didn't outweigh the damage caused by cultural appropriation and misrepresentation. So, what do you think? Have anything to add to this theoretical mind?
I hope you took something away from this. Regardless of how you feel about it, it's cultural appropriation. And don't be so quick to want to argue against something when the person that whatever you're doing, it belongs to their culture and they're calling you out on it. You look crazy. You look crazy. Okay? You're just reinforcing the stereotypes and the narratives. People can't just pick up people's stuff and do as they see fit and want to exploit it. Okay? I'm married to a Mexican woman. You don't see me running around tossing up sombreros talking about this is my culture now because I'm married to a Mexican woman. You got crazy people out here that say stuff like, well, I got a black relative, or I got a Latino this, or I got a da-da-da-da. I could say and do this. No. My wife is married to a black woman. She not going around saying nigga. She knows that that is not her. That's not her thing. It's not. Yes, Mexicans were oppressed by white people, but we are not the same. Our oppression doesn't look the same. The similarity is we've been oppressed, but our oppression is not the same. We are not the same. Our experiences are not the same. There are Asians and Latinos that can get away with things that I can't get away with. Why? For things called passing, which we'll watch in another video. But I hope y'all take something from this and learn. Peace! And stop motherfucking appropriating people's cultures. Jug is whack.